Hello and welcome to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. Now before we get into things, just want to give a mention to the fact that I'm doing a giveaway on my Facebook page. There's a link to the page in the description, so if you're interested in picking up some nice freebies courtesy of Konami, then just drop down into the description and head over there. Alright, so for this duel we're going to be having a Salamangreat versus Sky Striker duel. This is one of the most popular voted duels on the Salamangreat Facebook page. We're also looking into arranging a Salamangreat versus Orcust duel, since that was also a very popular option. So this is the Salamangreat list, very similar to the previous one. It does feature the mole here. I think this is in place of the third Foxy. But again, you know, 12 hand traps in the main? Yeah, 12 hand traps, including the Drolls, which may or may not be coming out for future events, given that the Droll doesn't do an awful lot against Salamangreats unless they have to normal the debug. There are a few variations that could be made to this. Let's keep in mind that the match was actually played before the most recent YCS in Düsseldorf. But a very strong lineup overall. You have the typical Salamangreat lineup, plus the mole in order to get some additional draw power. And for the extra deck, while it doesn't feature the Fusion of Fire combo, you do have access to a lot of powerful monsters and power code talker as well. On the Sky Striker side of things, this is actually the list taken from the Rochester Regional, which happened again, I think it was just the weekend before Düsseldorf, and this took first place. So Triple Ash and Triple Veiler being the most important hand traps here, and plenty of spell and trap removal actually, with Twisters and Heavy Storm Dusters being played here. He did actually mention that he might prefer playing something like Mind Crush, I think, in the deck instead, but this is what he played for the event, so we may as well use this version of the deck as our optimal go-to. So kicking off game one, we have the Sky Strikers on the right hand side, piloted by Jason, taking first turn and setting 3. While on the left hand side, we have John playing Salamangreats, and I believe he's going to activate the circle during the draw phase to avoid any draw shenanigans, and open up with a Falco. Very nice, because it will be able to reset his circle. However, there is a Widow Anchor to stop the Bail effect, unfortunately, which does mean that he's not going to be able to get any further. There's also a Veiler for the Gazelle. He's now trapped on 2 monsters, however he does have that Spinny in hand, which means another Link monster can be made after he goes via the Stallion, which presumably will pick up a Jaguar. Since that is the typical turn 1 play and he's already got the first level 4 out, so yeah, brings out the Jaguar. He will now actually have access to the second copy of Sunlight Wolf if he wants to. He resolves a Desires here, which I believe is pretty powerful at this point, having already removed Jaguar from the deck, and it looks like he's got a Rage in hand, which could potentially be game stealing if he's able to push through all the cards that Jason has on offer, because Jason doesn't have an awful lot here, just 2 back row left, and I believe 1 or 2 cards in hand. Looks like an Eagle Booster he's got in hand actually, which isn't going to really do anything here. So Sunlight Wolf and then a Jaguar, both being able to punch in, and the fact that he got to reset the Gazelle back to hand off that, and then he can use Heatleo to deal with the back row. But it is a Dusters, which is going to get rid of the circle there and actually put his other set, which was an unfortunate Metal Foes Fusion, going straight into the grave. 2 sets from John here, presumably one of those is the Rage. And then from Jason's side, we see he's going to kick things off with the Fusion. He really needs to be able to get into some kind of play here, having just opened up with essentially a brick, or at least nothing especially valuable versus John. He does have the Area 0 picking up an Engage here, which is very, very useful for him, but it has to pop the Eagle Booster, which shouldn't be too much of a problem. So he does have the Engage. There is no response from John, which means he can begin getting his searches off. However, it looks like John may have a hand trap available to deal with a Kagari, and it seems that Jason's going to go for the riskier play here, adding the multi-roll in order to try and avoid his spells being stopped. But John has the Rage, and that is going to deal with the multi-roll, preventing Jason from getting his effect off. I believe, yeah, he has to tribute the, or send to the grave? Yeah, send to the grave the Heatleo if he wants to deal with things, but Jason is looking at it and considering attempting to steal the Stallion, I believe here. I think he just decides that He doesn't have enough resources available. He's only got the one Widow Anchor, so he just scoops here. While it was unfortunate for Jason not opening up an especially strong hand or even a way into a Link monster, this is typically what we see with the Salamangreats being able to just shut down the plays that are available to decks such as Sky Striker, especially with things like Droll and Ash so readily available, and the Roar for the engage. So once again, we're going to see Jason going first in game 2. This time he has a Rotor, which is going to add the Ray. It doesn't look like there's going to be a Droll from John here. So Jason is going to be pushed ahead, potentially able to establish some heavy resources, but it looks like no, he has to go into the Shizuku. He doesn't have access to an engage here. That's very unfortunate. He's going to have to search the first engage and just end with one set card against John. So John has sided, I believe, and he's put in the Pancratops there, which is going to be able to deal with one of the back row he faces down. So it just depends, is he going to pop it straight away? Yep, he's going to pop right away and goes into a Shard Cannon, banishing the Pancratops. Not really an issue here though. All it does is put a spell in the grave for Jason, and admittedly, Shard Cannon is actually very strong within this matchup. If John had committed to his plays earlier, then if he'd had a Gazelle engraved, it would have been banished off the Shard Cannon, potentially shutting down John's entire turn. But as it is, because he had the Pancratops to deal with it, and he has the Lady Debug on top, and there's no response from Jason, he's able to establish his plays and get his Bell Link stuff going. And from here he goes Bale into Bale. So the Gazelle there was added off the Debug, I believe. Obviously it couldn't trigger because when Debug goes to grave, we have a problem. There is an Ash on the Bale though, so it can't search the field spell, which means that he's not going to be able to trigger the Gazelle. So a very, very strong play to be able to just Ash the Bale. And it means that Jason now, having the engage in hand, he can start looping through, getting his searches off, and putting himself in a much stronger position. Just double checking the graveyard there to check that there's no annoying effect that's going to come into play. Potentially something like Foxy could be very strong within this matchup, given that it can pop the multi-roll. But as it stands, it doesn't look like John has anything in particular that he can work with. So Jason's going to be able to set up the multi-roll and the Area Zero, putting him in a very, very strong position, just facing down a Bale Links and a back row. And once again, the engage coming down. He's just going to search out the afterburners here. He doesn't really have an awful lot he needs to search, given that he has access to so many Widow Anchors already, and the ability to recycle them. So he's just debating whether or not he wants to be able to remove 2 cards at once with the afterburners. But on resolution of the ad, John's just considering he's going to Twin Twisters away the multi-roll so he doesn't have to deal with that. Probably the right move here, given that it reduces the amount of advantage that Jason can generate off this single turn. And it does mean that he'll actually have had that response in the first case, because otherwise Jason could very easily have just multi-rolled away something and then dealt with all of the cards that John had available. The Area Zero doesn't look like it resolved anything, so just going to carry on with the turn, I believe, and considering the options here. So we see Jason is in a position with plenty of cards available in his hand, potentially very far ahead in terms of available resources. He's just going to swing in with the Kagari to reduce the number of monsters that John has, because we do know that having the Bale Links can potentially be a serious problem if it's able to go into a Sunlight Wolf. But here we have a Shizuku effect resolving. There aren't an awful lot of targets available for Jason at this moment, but he can add the Widow Anchor as an option there. And we see John just beginning his turn, I believe, and facing down Shizuku and double set. So he does have a Foxy play here, which I believe was discarded with the Twin Twisters, and since there is an Area Zero on the field, he can deal with that. He does pop it, which then prompts Jason to not do anything, obviously, because if he does put the Ray on board, he puts himself in the unfortunate position of none of his Widow Anchors being live. I believe they're just adjusting for damage here. And since the Jack Jaguar is engraved, it will now become live with the Bale Links I believe Jason is going to Widow Anchor the Bale Link so he doesn't have to deal with the effect searching the Sanctuary. But that does mean that Gazelle is still able to go off sending a Spinny. So John now has a Pancratops as well, and that's a fair amount of monsters available to him. He can summon the Stalio in a much better position than normal, ditching the Gazelle in order to summon another monster from deck. Let's just see what he goes for. There's a few options left available, including the Falco if he wants to reset something, but I don't think he has a spell or trap available to be reset. So we may see him go for something a little bit more unusual here. He does go for the Mole here, actually. Since he doesn't have to put a level 3 or 4 on board for a particular XZ summon, the Mole could potentially be very useful because it allows you to draw 2, essentially. I think you just need to have 5 Salamangreat names in the grave and shuffle those into the deck to get your double draw, which gets you some extra recycling ability on top of what Jaguar already offers. So he can summon the Wolf here. He doesn't decide to use the Stalio bounce, which I believe he could have used just on the Bale, but doing so would have meant that Jason would be able to respond with his spells or traps, so leaving the Bale is potentially a much better option. Although he does have the Pancratops to deal with that too, so I think he's going to go for the Heatleo, yeah, to shuffle away the back row so he doesn't have to have any fear of it, essentially. So he still has a response available with the Pancratops as an interrupt, despite not having access to any of the searches, since all of his searches have been stopped at every point. Can attack over the Bale Links and put himself in a much stronger position. Attack over the Shizuku as well, I believe. Oh no, he leaves the Shizuku up, I think. Which means that Jason is able to work his way through to Kagari here. And the Kagari gives him a wealth of options available, since I do believe he has access to multiple cards in the grave. And he's going to use the Afterburners to get rid of the Pancratops so he doesn't have to worry about any kind of interrupt during the opposing turn. It's really going a lot more back and forth here. Jason does have plenty of resources in the hand, and he's able to assemble a much stronger board rapidly here, thanks to the Ray, Kagari, and Heatleo, but he can't do game-winning damage, I believe. I think he's going to fall slightly short of it, because he won't be able to use the Ray effect to make another summon, which is a little bit unfortunate here. So I think he's just working out if there is a way to do that extra damage. But it looks like we're just going to see these 3 attacks go through, and that will leave John on a few hundred life points, 300 left over. And Jason just essentially wanting to clear these Link monsters so that John can't start recuperating. So he builds up a Topologic Bomber Dragon. And I believe this was a slight mistake because he left the Ray on board, which means he's not going to be able to resolve anything. So even though he has access to things like Widow Anchor in his hand, he can't commit those to the board. However, John is still on the back burner here. He gets to use the Mole for a Pot of Greed effect, essentially, and that draws him into a Desires, which could be very strong. So essentially, Pot of Greed off Pot of Greed. This is the 2019 equivalent. He has a Gazelle, which can allow him to build up a little bit more advantage, sending the Roar here, so that he has plays for the future. And then he can go back into the Stalio again, which was shuffled back with the Mole. So that's a very nice other utility, is that sometimes you can't summon your Jaguar because you don't have a Link Zone available. So you can just work your way into additional monsters like the Stalio by putting them back with the Mole. He then gets the Falco, which will allow him to reset. I think he attacked over the Kagari there and then returns the... is he going to return the Topologic to the extra deck? Yeah, it looks like he did. And then you can go into the second Wolf, which triggers the Falco and gives him access to the Jaguar all over again. And now he can steer clear of any potentially sighted in Kaiju by summoning the Bale and get himself access to the Sanctuary. So it's looking a lot better for John in this situation. He now has plenty of options in the hand, thanks to resolving Pot of Greed off Pot of Greed. And he plays the Sanctuary, so that he can go from Wolf into Wolf. And that means that the Roar will be live. Then he goes into the Heatleo though. So with the Helio on board, there is a jamming waves from Jason hitting only a twin twister and then attempting to get rid of Helio, but there's a bail to stop that, and it's going to make things very tough for Jason. He actually only has a Widow Anchor and then Dusters, and during the end phase he gets hit by a Rage. So completely locked out of the game there, unfortunately, in the end. If only he'd managed to be able to do that extra 300 damage, he would have been able to clinch a game and move into game 3. But unfortunately for him, it just didn't turn out the way. Salamangreat's coming out on top once again and proving that they can take on the Sky Strikers, the previous meta of recent events. What do you think about this match? Do you have any thoughts or suggestions on changes that you would make to the list or to the decks themselves? Leave those suggestions in the comment section down below. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas. Plus, if you have any ideas for matchups that you would like to see from the channel, then leave those down there as well. And make sure to subscribe and put the notification bell on if you want to stay tuned for all of the episodes of Top Deck and the UK Nats format videos. Of course, if you just want to follow a particular one, feel free to just get yourself onto one of the playlists. There is a playlist for Top Deck and a playlist for the UK Nats format 2019. So if you only want to be following one of those in particular, just get onto the playlist and you'll be able to follow everything through from there. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.